Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we're breaking down all of SEC's Week 4 football action from a betting perspective. And today we're talking about the Southern Miss Golden Eagles visiting the #1 Alabama Crimson Tide on Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern at Bryant-Denny Stadium. This game's going to be on the SEC Network. From a betting perspective, this game opened as Alabama is a 46-point favorite. That line has moved slightly down to Alabama minus 45 as of the recording of this video. The over-under opened at 61.5, and it actually has moved a little bit as well, down to 58.5 as of this video. I'm going to bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, what do you think about the Tide taking on usually a traditionally pretty good group of 5 team, but maybe not so much this year?
Yeah, I think if you have women and children nearby, you might want to hide the TV set, hide their eyes, because this one could be offensively bad. But you know what? The betting line makes everything even. So still a great game to break down from a betting perspective. Nick, why don't you get into Nick's news and notes and let us know the headlines as we head into Saturday's game.
In Tuscaloosa Saturday evening, we've got a high of 81, low of 63. So you could probably expect that temperature game time to be somewhere in the mid to lower 70s and dropping as the game goes on. But we don't have any rain in the forecast, and wind should be minimal. So not really a big factor there. On the injury standpoint, the biggest injury is probably on the Southern Miss side, where their starting quarterback, who's West Virginia transfer Trey Lowe, has been out since sustaining an early injury, and he will miss this game supposedly. So they're going to be playing with a backup quarterback in what already probably will be an ugly game. On the Tide side of things, there are some guys who are questionable, but nobody that should have any major impact on this game. I know that a lot of people saw starting running back Brian Robinson get a little dinged up with his ribs in that Florida game, but he returned in that game and seems probable for this game for as much as they're going to need him, right? And then some news and notes here. I just want to bring back up the Week 3 Florida game for just a second, because this team, this new look Tide team with the new quarterback and the new skill position players and the new key pieces on defense, well, they faced their first real road test last week in the SEC. And went to the Swamp and they won 31-29, and they looked really good early in the game. They looked like they were going to cruise to a typical Alabama big win, but Florida seemed to gain some steam as that game went on, and the Tide defense looked a little bit vulnerable, maybe a little bit tired, even though they have plenty of depth, as Florida really looked like the better team for the majority of the second half. And in some ways, Alabama was probably fortunate that the game wasn't 65 minutes instead of 60, because it sure felt like the Gators were coming on. So it just makes me wonder, when we get deeper into the SEC schedule, what are we going to see out of this Tide team? And are they a little bit vulnerable in the SEC West against some of these emerging teams like your Ole Misses or your Texas A&Ms or even your Arkansas? And then I would also point to Southern Miss. Their week 3 game against Troy was pretty ugly. They lost that game 21-9. And they did it in just a disaster of an offensive performance. They only had 157 total yards on 66 plays, -1 rushing yards. And of course, that includes sacks in college, but still 158 passing yards. Again, talking about they're playing their backup quarterback. And I just don't have a great feeling about them going into this game. Christopher, what are you thinking about this from a betting perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I feel kind of bad for Will Hall, who is the Southern Miss head coach. I mean, he's a quote unquote young head coach. He just turned 41, so I don't know if he's necessarily young, but in the coaching world at a FBS school, still fairly early in his career there. And he probably would not have had a head coaching job because he was the Tulane offensive coordinator, if not for the disaster that took place the last 2 years in Hattiesburg. And he has just a shell of a Conference USA roster to work with this year. And in the week 1, he lost 31-7 to South Alabama. That alone should give you an indication of where his roster is this year. But it was interesting how he responded to that game. He went on record and said he was the biggest fraud in the last 50 years of Southern Miss football. He called it humiliating. And Lane Kiffin even took time out of his day to tweet at Will Hall and tell him to take a deep breath. It got so bad. So this is a glorified scrimmage for Alabama. Now, looking a little bit at what does that mean specifically for the roster? Well, Southern Miss has built their team, their offense around Frank Gore Jr., Frank Gore's son, and he does average 5 yards per carry and 10.4 yards per catch. And the backup running back, Dejon Richard, is also averaging 5.7 yards per carry. But with the starting quarterback out, Southern Miss is turning to Ty Keys, who last season was playing at the 2A high school level in Mississippi at a school that, as of a few years ago, had a little bit more than 200 people enrolled in it. And he did get some snaps against Troy. This was a home game last week for Southern Miss. And he earned an 11.7 QBR against Troy at home. Now, I looked up Taylorsville Attendance Center, and I looked up the Taylorsville, Mississippi population, and it looks like they had, in 2019, the census estimate was 1,245 people. So again, this is a guy that was playing like almost, 8-man football at the Mississippi level, almost the smallest, possible high school level you can play in. And he's never played a game on the road. He's a true freshman. Now he's going into Bryant-Denny Stadium at night and playing Alabama. So I'll let you figure out how you think that may go for him and the Southern Miss, offense, and how much room you think Alabama is going to give Frank Gore to run the ball in this game. But on the other side of the ball, it is worth noting that there's been 121 quarterbacks that have dropped back at least 50 times this season. And Bryce Young is 96th in average depth of target. That's the average distance that your pass travels through the air before it gets to a receiver. And we all know that Alabama lost 4 first-round picks at receiver the last 2 years, but they still have some talent there. And so, he's in the neighborhood of Rocky Lombardi at Northern Illinois and Arthur Sikowski at Illinois, who was a Rutgers transfer, who didn't even make it at Rutgers. So the question becomes for Alabama, can Bryce Young throw the deep ball? And he definitely needs to figure that out before they host Ole Miss, the week later. And so I do expect for Alabama to cut it loose a few times, at least in the first half, try to get him comfortable, try to at least put some things on film with him going downfield. Try not to give Lane Kiffin any idea that, like, hey, you don't have to play Alabama beyond 7 yards this year. So I think that'll be very important to watch in this game. But Nick, what are you picking from a betting standpoint in this game?
Yeah, so listening to you talk about the Southern Miss quarterback situation made me feel all the more better with the pick that I've got written down. I don't know that Southern Miss scores, and if they do, I feel like it's in single digits. So I like Alabama minus 45. That's a lot of points to lay, but I feel like the Tide can cover that against this offense. And to that point, I'm going to try to thread a really thin needle here into laying 45 points and taking the under in the same game. And so at 58.5, that gives me a little bit of wiggle room, but it's just enough for me to feel like that's where this game's going to fall. So give me Alabama minus 45, under 58.5. How do you see it?
Well, there are a few sports books out there that will allow you to bet on not only on team totals, but team totals by half. And if you have one of those sports books, Southern Miss first half under on their team total has to be the lock of the year for me. I mean, Alabama, Nick Saban is very well known for being easy on teams late in the second half. So maybe there's a risk if you take the full game team total under for Southern Miss that late in the fourth quarter, he's going to not gift them a score, but not necessarily be going all out to stop it either. And I do think under 58.5, if they have to make a play for the entire game and all 60 minutes, I would definitely go with under 58.5. I like that better than Alabama minus 45, although that's also what I'm taking. But as Nick mentioned, that's a very thin needle to try to thread with Alabama and under 58.5 and minus 45. I do think Alabama's offense is not nearly as explosive as we've seen last year and 2 years ago. We'll find out, especially this week, if they try to put some stuff on tape for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and if they try to at least build some confidence in Bryce Young going downfield deep. But I'm not going to rely on Alabama just to score, 60-plus points in this game by themselves. So that's why I'm going with the under 58.5. But for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll talk to you all next week.